Bill C-36, Canada's Consumer Product Safety Act.
Welcome to NextReg on Compliance. My name is Mike Moffat. I'm the Director of Communications here at NextReg Compliance. There's a new proposed law that I believe any company who is selling a consumer chemical in Canada needs to be made aware of. And this law, this proposed law, which is now known as Bill C-36, or the Canadian Consumer Product Safety Act. This is actually the third time the Canadian government has tried to pass such an act in Parliament. The first two times it was known as Bill C-52 and C-6 respectively. So you may have heard of these. It's now called Bill C-36. We expect this act to pass sometime in late 2010. There's no guarantee that it will. It's just our feeling here at NextReg. Now, how the Canadian system works is that you have acts of parliament, so big laws passed by the government, and under those acts you have a set of regulations. Those regulations are issued by regulatory authorities such as your Health Canada, your Environment Canada, and so on. So in Canada we have something that's known as the Hazardous Products Act that was passed by Parliament decades ago. And under that act, we have about 24 or so sets of regulations, including the CPR, or the Controlled Products Regulation. This governs WMIS, industrial labeling for consumer chemicals and that kind of thing. We also have the CCCR, which is your set of regulations regarding consumer chemicals in Canada. Both of these regulations fall under the Hazardous Products Act. Now, if the CCPSA passes, it will replace the Hazardous Products Act, but not completely, only for consumer regulations. So we would see the Hazardous Products Act, it would still exist, and we would have the Controlled Products Regulations operating underneath of it. But we'd also have this new CCPSA, and we would have Canadian Consumer Chemical Regulations, or your CCCR 2001, operating under that. So the first thing that's really important to note is your CCCR regulations, they're not changing at all. So if you sell a consumer product or market a consumer chemical product in Canada, you're not going to have to change your labeling because of this, assuming that your labeling is compliant. None of the symbols or font sizes or required text is changing here at all. But there are two important changes that this act brings that will affect anyone selling or marketing a consumer chemical product in Canada. So what's new? The first thing that's new is increased penalty for non-compliance. The penalties under the CCPSA are about 5 times what they were under the HPA. So we're now seeing maximum penalties for non-compliance of up to $5 million. So naturally, this is a really significant amount. So it's more important than ever to make sure your Canadian consumer labels are compliant, your Canadian consumer chemical labels are compliant with the CCCR. But I think even more important is now that Health Canada is going to have a set of powers that they don't have under the HPA. And the most important of these powers is the power to recall, to force a full public recall of non-compliant consumer chemical products. Under the current regulation, or under the current act, they do not have this power. They can recommend to companies that they do so, but they can't absolutely force it. Now, under Bill C-36, the Minister of Health, or a person or persons that the minister designates, will have the authority to issue a recall order. It's not clear at this time who, if anyone, that the minister will designate this to, but it is a power they'll have. Now, interestingly enough, this is a change from both Bill C-52 and Bill C-6. In those bills, it was written that a Health Canada inspector, so someone at the inspector level, would have this power. Now they don't, unless, of course, the Minister of Health gives this power to inspectors. So it's a big change there. So it's not clear at this time whether or not we're going to see a big spike in consumer chemicals being publicly recalled. Right now in 2009, 2010, we're seeing about 4 to 6 consumer chemicals a month being recalled in Canada. It's not clear whether or not this is going to increase a great deal, but the potential is out there. So I believe it's more important than ever to make sure that your consumer chemical products are compliant with the CCCR. So that's it for this video. I look forward to answering your questions in future videos. So if you have any questions, please send them to me at info@nexreg.com. Take care.
This presentation and all the information contained herein is not intended to replace or be used in place of the judgment of a qualified regulatory compliance professional. The opinions expressed are those of NexReg Compliance at the time the presentation was recorded. Regulations and interpretations of regulations can change rapidly, so please consult a qualified regulatory compliance professional before starting any project. This presentation is presented for educational purposes and is therefore supplementary and not to be considered exhaustive. NexReg Compliance, its officers, directors and employees hereby disclaim any and all responsibility for any loss, injury, damage or expense directly or indirectly arising out of or relating to use or reliance on this presentation or the material contained in this presentation.